of love. Today, I really wanted to talk about fear of rejection because underneath a lot of our behaviors, especially the behaviors that come across quite closed off, is a deep fear of rejection. So, I want to talk about what some of these behaviors might look like in any ordinary relationship. And you may find yourself a little bit surprised because these behaviors are actually quite normalized, which, in my opinion, is quite problematic and is honestly one of the driving forces of why I've created this podcast, so that you have new perspectives on the ways in which you might show up in your relationship and to start to see those behaviors for what they are so that you can actually create more intimacy and connection between you and your partner. So, one of many ways that you may try to ultimately protect yourself in your relationship unknowingly is through judgment and criticism. And you do this because it's this survival mechanism of, if I judge you first, I don't have to sit with the fear that you might reject me. So, for example, maybe you pick apart your partner's habits. Like, you're so lazy. Why can't you ever put your clothes away? Why can't you clean up after yourself? Why don't you ever cook dinner? Or making snide comparisons. My best friend's husband cleans up after himself. Why can't you? Or maybe over focusing on flaws in his communication or his effort towards you, your relationship. And you do this in order to avoid opening up your heart, because there's so much vulnerability in that because of the insane amount of what ifs. What if he rejects me first? What if he abandons me? Like, what's your core wounding? What if he's unfaithful? So, because our brain's job is to protect us from things that aren't familiar or unexpected, it will try and keep a divide between you and your partner unknowingly. This is all happening very unconsciously, hence why we resort to behaviors like judgment and criticism. Maybe you withdraw or you shut down as a means to protect yourself. If you want to look at attachment styles, anxious attachment styles and avoidant attachment styles are just protective mechanisms. They just show up differently for each of us. So why might you withdraw or shut down? Because that disconnection feels safer than risking being seen and possibly rejected. Maybe you give your partner the silent treatment instead of expressing your hurt. Maybe you become absorbed in work, in the kids, or scrolling on your phone, binge watching Netflix instead of facing the conflict. Maybe you say fine when clearly you're not fine. So these are just examples of what withdrawal and shutdown might look like, which at the core is just that fear of rejection. Control and perfectionism, another example of how we try to keep ourselves safe. Because if you can control everything, if you can be perfect, your partner will have no reason to leave you. And it could look like over functioning in the relationship, organizing everything, making all the decisions, doing all the emotional labor, all the emotional heavy lifting. Maybe it's critiquing your partner, how he does things. Maybe he doesn't clean the way you want him to clean. And so you turn around and just say something like, I'll just do it myself. You never do it right. You never do it good enough. You just half-ass it, which is incredibly shaming to your partner and potentially very hurtful as well. Perhaps it looks like setting impossibly high standards for yourself or your partner or the relationship in order to avoid vulnerability. And I call this setting yourself or your partner up for failure, because emphasis on impossibly high standards. They cannot be reached, because whether you like it or not, you are a human being, which means you are flawed, and perfectly imperfect. And by setting you and your partner up with these impossibly high standards, you will indefinitely be let down. And so you use that as a way to avoid being in that vulnerability of the what ifs, right? So it makes you feel in control. If I can put that divide between us first, I'm in control of the hurt, of the suffering. And frankly, women are really good at making their partner out to be the bad guy. Not all women, but I have worked with many women that are so good at focusing on all the things their partner's doing wrong, how they're not doing things the way they want them to, loving them the way they want them to. And it's because if they were to actually see their partner's actions for what they were, which is them trying to love you in their way, for example, if they were to acknowledge that, receive that love, then we are increasing our chances of being in the firing range of heartbreak and hurt. And it might feel like having that rug pulled out from underneath you. And that can be so shocking and so jarring, so scary and terrifying that we do all that we can to try and avoid that. So we focus on all our partner's quote unquote red flags or the ways he doesn't do things to your standards, but it is just self-protection at the core. Another example is overgiving or people pleasing. I think all of us can probably relate to this in some way, shape, or form. And it happens because if I can keep you happy, you won't reject me. Which again, at the core is this fear of rejection. And this might look like always saying yes, even when you're absolutely exhausted, or suppressing your own needs or wants or desires to avoid rocking the boat. Maybe you go over the top with giving care or giving gifts to earn love from your partner. And this people pleasing and overgiving is just, it's not authentic. It is not even wholly honest because you are saying yes when you mean no. You aren't speaking up for what you want, which is just reaffirming to your subconscious mind that I'm not enough, that my needs don't matter. And we need to be reaffirming the opposite and saying, actually, hey, this is what I would like. I would prefer to do this over this. I'm going to stop buying you so many gifts because I'm actually starting to get resentful because you're not giving it to me back. And it's being able to see your actions for what they are. It is not his fault that he's not buying you the gifts back or giving you the same kind of care back. It is your choice to do those things, to overgive. And without going too deeply into it, I would then pose to you, are you asking him to reciprocate or just expecting him to read your mind, placing unrealistic expectations and standards on him with something like, well, I do it for you. Why wouldn't you think to do it for me? If you loved me, you would do it. But that's not how life works. He's human. He's got his own shit going on in his head. And he's very likely showing up for you and giving you love and care in the way that he thinks is loving and caring. It might not necessarily be the way that you feel that, but it's very possible he is trying. And when we undermine that and we shame them for giving it their best, even if you don't think it is, perhaps, or we continue to focus on their flaws and highlight to them where they're falling short, we are not lifting them up. We are not supporting them or encouraging them to want to show up better. We're shaming them and making them wrong. And I don't know about you, but negative reinforcement, which is ultimately what that is, doesn't work for me. It makes me feel shitter, makes me want to show up even less. And I'm not saying that you need to praise your partner like they're a child, but maybe they would like to hear, hey, babe, you're doing a great job. Thank you for working so hard for our family. Thank you for doing the dishes. Even if in your mind, you're like, oh, it's not to my standard. Keep it to yourself. Is it really a big deal? Like, truly, I will often ask myself, because I used to do this all the time, big perfectionist, big people pleaser, overgiving, always focusing on judgment of how my partner is or isn't showing up for me. And I've gotten to a place now where I'm like, all right, if I'm slipping into that, I can see it for what it is. It is just self protection, it's my safety net. And I will ask myself, is this make or break? Like, is this really going to impact our relationship negatively? Or is it something that I can just let go? Because often when we are in this state of judgment, even people pleasing, control, perfectionism, it is actually mirroring to us something deeper inside of us, feeling inadequate, not enough, not worthy. And so we think it's about them, but that's just a projection. And when you can start to see these behaviors for what they really truly are, you can change the game in your relationship. When you can start to take that radical accountability and responsibility for your actions and the ways in which you armor up to protect yourself, often unknowingly, you can create so much more love, depth, intimacy, improved communication. And then you start to feel better about yourself. You become a better mother, better employee, better friend, daughter. Because when our relationships aren't great, whether it's done consciously or not, it can be destabilizing. I don't know about you, but when my relationships in the past haven't been in a great place, it is all consuming for me. For some people, they're probably completely avoidant and just sweep it under the rug and pretend it's not a problem. But in their subconscious, it's still there. And they're not going to be performing at their quote unquote best selves because your relationship is the foundation of your home. And we want our relationships to add to our lives, not just add further stress. Does that mean that that's always going to be the case? Absolutely not. But if you are more often than not feeling depleted or like your relationship is taking from you, if it's exhausting, then something's got to change. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to if you don't want it to, but there is so much more power in you looking at the way you contribute to this relationship. And it is my hope that I can shed new light on your relationship so you can take back your power instead of giving it away and always blaming your partner for the ways that he is or isn't showing up. Maybe by you making changes can radically alter the trajectory of your relationship. That is the goal, no? To have a thriving relationship instead of something mediocre or just acting like your housemates. Otherwise, what's the point of being in a relationship, really? They are not the reason for our fulfillment, for our enoughness, but they add to it. So, coming back to some other behaviors in which we try to avoid rejection, maybe we try to preempt rejection. If I push you away first, you can't hurt me. That could look like ending arguments with something like maybe we're just not meant to be. You having that impulse to want to run, which is you just testing whether he'll fight for you. Does he really love me? Will he chase me? And then you've got power plays coming into the equation, chaos. Maybe it makes you feel alive to be chased after because maybe you've got some daddy issues, for example. I know I certainly have and still on occasion do because I too am only human. None of us are perfect. It might also look like making sarcastic comments, which is just undercutting or preventing intimacy. And maybe these sarcastic comments are actually laced in truth. But because it's coming across sarcastic, you can dress it up as, oh, I don't mean it. But really, you do. Maybe it's pulling away when things start to feel good, stable, because your brain, your subconscious mind is like, whoa, this is too much. You are too close. I'm not used to things feeling so stable. This is actually quite unfamiliar to me. So I'm going to armor up and protect myself from this because of all of those potential what ifs. And perhaps it might look like jealousy or hypervigilance. It's you constantly scanning for potential abandonment. And you might not even do this consciously, which is why we need to start bringing awareness to our behaviors, to our unconscious thoughts and behaviors. Because without awareness, you can't change. That is the first step to creating transformation. And this could look like checking his phone, his social media, looking for evidence that he's being unfaithful, disloyal, reading into every shift in his tone. You might start to think or even say to him, "Are you upset with me? You haven't been as affectionate lately. Do you not love me anymore?" Those kinds of thoughts and assumptions. Maybe it's overreacting to just small distances between you and your partner. So how might jealousy or hypervigilance be showing up for you, if at all? And these behaviors at the core, they're not your truth, not really. They're just you in self-protection mode. Because in the past, you have been hurt by your dad, by your mum, by friends, by siblings, by family, by teachers, past partners, whatever it is. You've been hurt by other people's actions. And so now you do all you can to try and prevent being in any kind of vulnerability like that where it can happen again. And I really hope that you are open to hearing this perspective. If you've made it this far, chances are you are. But I promise you, if you embrace this new way of seeing yourself, you will improve your life and very likely your relationship too. But you need to start being able to be radically honest with yourself and seeing yourself and your behaviors in a new light. And if you desire support with this, this is my genius. So please reach out to me on Instagram or on Facebook or through my website. All the details are listed in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. And frankly, I don't think you should, because you are likely not going to be able to see your actions for what they are. I've been doing this for a very long time now, so I know what to look for. And we are really, really good at unintentionally lying to ourselves so that we don't have to face those undesirable emotions like shame, pain, guilt, anger, frustration, whatever it is, that we actually spend as much of our time as we can avoiding experiencing. But the more that we can actually lean in and build our own ability to trust ourselves and build our mental and emotional resilience, the less scary these what ifs actually become, because we know that we've got our own back regardless. And that ultimately is what I support women to do, to be able to trust themselves and have their own back and not be reliant or dependent on anyone else to do that for them. If they do, it's just an added bonus. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. If you loved this episode, I would be so thankful if you gave this podcast some love. If you want to rate it, share it online, share it with your family, friends, I'd be so grateful. Otherwise, I will see you in our next episode. Ciao!